Guys, this is Stephen Dexter, and welcome to the Mass Class Podcast. Class is in session. I'm here with Landon Horst today, who's my buddy. He's currently in his master's program. Actually, you finished your master's, right? You're now in your internship for dietetics.
I am in my internship for dietetics. I haven't finished a master's, but this counts for master's credit.
Gotcha. Cool. So anyway, big brain boy over here. We're going to be talking a little bit about natural versus enhanced bodybuilding. We're going to talk a little bit about contest preps and the differences and our experiences with contest preps. So we're just going to dive right into it. All right. So the first question I want to ask you, Landon, is do you think that we should take natural athletes or people who claim they're natural at face value, or do you think we should be a little bit more skeptical?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I've thought about this too, like, when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'll see, we were talking about in somebody's bio it says like natural athlete. And I'm looking at some of their pictures thinking like, there's no way in hell that, and I don't even, it's just in my nature to be skeptical. But the more I think about it, I don't really think it matters unless they're going to step on like a WNBF stage or going to compete in tested bodybuilding. You know what I mean? To me, it's like, if you say you're natural on Instagram, I mean, who really cares? You know what I mean? Like, so as far as that goes, I think we should just take people's word for it, and, unless they're going to step on stage, and then they have to do the polygraph and they have to do the drug test, So.
I agree. I just don't think there's any value in assuming that someone isn't what they say they are, and there's no way that you can definitively prove either way if someone's natural or enhanced. And like you said, it just doesn't really matter. There are just the top tier genetic freaks who no matter what they say, what they do, they could be in be in 3 different divisions that all drug test, and just because they're 5'10" and naturally shredded at 200 pounds, like, we're all going to be like, nah, no way. You can't, it's impossible, yeah. Right? Because their FFMI is over 27 or whatever,
Right.
We're
arbitrary cutoff.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a fine line. If you're 26.9, you're good, dude. But yeah, it bewilders me that people are quick to assume that someone is natural versus enhanced. And I'm super guilty of this as well. Like, I see, the simian pandas on Instagram and be like, yo, dude, you have an IFBB pro level caliber physique. And it's like, we only know of like 2 or 3 people who have gotten to the IFBB as a natural. And most of them did it through like men's physique, So it's not, right. When it's definitely something that, I just don't know why we're still talking about it, I guess. Like, unless they're trying to step on like, a pro natural bodybuilding stage where there is that bar for everybody and everybody's under the same category of, taking out the super special sports supplements, and trying to compete on that even level. And then it's just like a genetics contest at that point, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you listen to the Stronger by Science podcast occasionally. And I remember,
yeah, I haven't missed an episode.
I've been featured a couple of times, so it's no big deal. Yeah, but a couple of weeks back, they were talking about assuming somebody isn't natural, and they were talking about how people that do that are people that tend to have never worked with elite level like genetic athletes, right? And they were all telling stories about people they'd met that were so insanely like genetically gifted that it's like incomprehensible. Guys that, were on a football team or whatever, and they were like, no, I literally can't work out my upper body because it gets too big. And Eric was like, come on, that can't be true. I've been trying to get too big my entire life. Like, nobody has that problem.
Yeah.
And then, so he started making the guy train his upper body, right? And it was like 3 weeks later, this guy was literally too big, like exploded. And, he's a college athlete. He's obviously like, Eric knows for a fact that this guy wasn't taking any sort of like steroids. I mean, he didn't even want to get big, so it'd be odd that he would be taking some anabolics or anything. And yeah, it was like 3 weeks of training arms, and they like wouldn't fit in his shirt.
My
I mean,
God.
can you imagine those kind of genetics are out there, and we're trying to like paint broad strokes on everybody that they fit in this little box of having the same genetics as you and I.
Yeah.
It's not a good way to think about it, in my opinion.
And not to say that, people in high school like can't and don't take steroids. Like there's obviously some people who do, but that's always something to think about. There's always one or two kids that you can look back to that you knew in, right around when puberty struck everyone, and they just turned into an adult, like overnight. You know what I mean? Like they went from like 160 pounds at like 5'8" to like 220 pounds at 6'2", like in like 3 weeks. And they're just like, what happened to you? What? I had this, I have two instances that I can think of. One was, I had a friend when I was in middle school who benched, I want to say like 335 in like 7th grade. Yeah, like what? This kid was like 230 pounds. I would go over, he had a twin brother and we were all friends, and I would go over and we would we were in 7th grade and had a bunch of pent up testosterone. And so we would like have like boxing matches in the backyard and stuff. And I would get my shit rocked all the time. But, it was just this crazy thing to see that this like 7th grader had like, he was bigger than I am now by like a considerable margin, and he was, 14, 13 years old, and it's like these people exist, and if they end up finding bodybuilding, which is a very small portion of people, they do not have to do a whole lot to get to a high level. And then once they get to a high level, they have to do a whole lot. But,
Yeah. No, I was actually, you kind of touched on a point that I was going to bring up too, is that for natural bodybuilding, there's a huge selection bias because, I mean, if you're a genetic freak, you probably knew that at a young age and you excelled at some sport and decided to play it in college, potentially professionally, and natural bodybuilding never crossed your radar. The people that do natural bodybuilding are people like me and you that didn't excel at anything else. You know what I mean?
sucked at most things, and we're just like,
like we found the gym. We have below average genetics, or maybe average. And then, that's the other people that are doing natural bodybuilding too. So then you get somebody that comes in that somehow didn't go pro in football or what else they could have done, and we're trying to compare ourselves to them. Like they've got to be on steroids.
Yeah, seriously. And the other thing is like people will talk about, enhanced athletes in like the NFL or something like that. Like these people aren't even training for hypertrophy. You know what I mean? And they're that massive. And you and not to throw shade at football players, because I don't think it's their fault, but some of the worst training you've ever seen comes out of college football rooms, right? It's like you see like the guy trying to clean 400 pounds with complete knee valgus, and his knees touch the floor and he's on his toes and his back is a scorpion, and the team is just behind him, and it's like, that is the worst training I've ever seen, and yet this guy is enormous. You know what I mean? Like that if you look at someone and their training is like, you're like, how are you potentially doing that? But that's when you're like, oh, you're a genetic freak,
Yeah.
If you want to test your genetics, if you want to test your genetics, like go in and do 100% of everything right. And if you like gained a few pounds of muscle, you have bad genetics. If you earned an IFBB Pro card, you have good genetics. That's what it seems like to me anyway.
No, totally. I agree.
Yeah. But, so you haven't competed in a while. And, when you competed, you did both men's physique and classic physique, right?
Yeah.
What year was that? How long ago was that?
That's 2016, so 4 years ago.
And were you in the NPC or did you do a natural show or both?
Just NPC. I didn't know natural organizations existed.
Gotcha. What was your prep like? Did you model it after anyone in like the scientific community? Did you follow kind of an old school mentality? What can you just kind of run us through what your prep was like?
Yeah. I do kind of want to preface it with it. I love having the opportunity to talk about it. I feel like it's something I've actually never really talked about, or even put on my Instagram or anything. And I think there was some insecurity, especially being like a new coach and stuff, to be like, look at all these mistakes I made. But no, I think it's a good learning experience. I think there's some good laughs here too. But when I first got into it, so it was like 2015, 2014, 2015, I had just learned about macros, right? And we were talking about this, like if it fits your macros. And I kind of had the same response you did, where I was like, no way. There's no way in hell that works. And it was from Lane Norton, right? And at this time, there weren't really that many people talking about it, especially when it comes to like a bodybuilding prep. And so in 2015, I did just like it was almost a test to prove this theory wrong. I was like, there's no way it works, but just in case, I'm going to try it. And in 2015, like the fall of 2015, I got super lean almost on accident, just by like trying to follow macros. And so that was kind of my impetus to be like, maybe I should do a bodybuilding show. Apparently I can do this quite easily, And it was absolutely like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where I thought, now that I knew what macros are, I'm a bodybuilding coach.
I know everything. I
exactly.
am
so,
the IFBB.
Yeah, so I would say I got most of my information from like Lane Norton, and then a couple people that he coached actually. And so they were all kind of given the same information. It was very much like, start with the minimum effective dose as far as your deficit goes. Here's what your protein should be, like 1 gram per pound, minimum fats, and then fill the rest in with carbs. And whatever the minimum deficit you have to be in to start losing weight, that's what you should do. And anytime you plateau, just take a little bit away, And to me, this seemed like a foolproof plan. I'm like, all right, let's go. And so that's what I started with. And it was funny because I was thinking I wanted to start with no cardio as well. And I was kind of lying to myself, because every day of the week I was taking like a 3-mile walk, which subconsciously I think I was like, no, this isn't cardio, but it's also going to like supercharge my results. I'm going to get lean like way quicker and whatever. But yeah, kind of lying to myself that it wasn't cardio. And it's a funny story, because then, I live in Montana, so November, or I guess it was like October rolls around, snow starts flying, and I stop walking all of a sudden, and just like mad plateau. Like, in fact, I think I was like gaining weight at some point. Yeah, my energy expenditure like took 1,000 calorie swing. So yeah, I guess I do have tons of stories about it, but I would say as a rough outline, it was like my first or second shot at a macros approach,
Yeah.
and feeling like I had it all figured out.
I gotcha. It's funny you say that. So just this last summer, I was working at a lumber yard, like helping, like basically like for anyone who hasn't been to a lumber yard, it's basically an outdoor version of Home Depot, where there are no rules and they let you wheelie the forklifts and stuff. And so I was working at this lumber yard, and I obviously had my phone on me, and the step counter in my phone was pretty consistently reaching the high to low, like, well, around like 30,000 steps a day, which for those of you who don't know is close to like 9 or 10 miles. Because I was just, I was working on my feet. There were 10-hour shifts, and I was just walking all day. And I was also at the very tail end of my bulk, and I was up around 230 pounds. And so I was sweating profusely, obviously, because, it's July in Montana and it's dry and I'm outside in the sun and I'm on the tarmac and I'm walking 30,000 steps a day and I'm eating over 1,000 grams of carbs every day. And it was just like this absolute nightmare. And I just remember thinking, like, when I get to Missoula, because I was moving from Hamilton, which is 45 minutes outside of Missoula, to Missoula, I was like, when I get to Missoula, I'm going to be able to, everything's just going to be easier because I don't have to take all these steps anymore. And I remember, like, thinking I was going to be able to, like, cut super easily on, like, 4,000 calories, because at the time I was eating like 6. And I remember during the end of my cut, I had days where I was like below 200 grams of carbs, because I went from the most active job I've ever had to being in school full time with all online classes and like having to really attempt to get like 5,000 steps in a day. And it's one of those things, like you brought it up, that people don't realize, like, everyone does cardio. It's just whether or not you're standing on a treadmill, going outside, or whatever. Everyone who is trying to lose weight is doing cardio in some sense. If you're not, you're like, the small amount of food you're going to have is just so upsetting. It really is. And I can speak from experience that, like, I was like, I never got below, I think that my lowest was 208 pounds. So around 210 pounds, I had days where my protein was at, 220, my fats were at 60, and my carbs were at 170. Like, it doesn't take a genius to know that that's under 2,000 calories, at over 200 pounds, and it's insane to think that, like, like you said, you're like, oh, I'm not doing cardio because I'm just walking. It's like you're doing cardio. You're just doing super low intensity steady state instead of an incline treadmill walk. It's the same thing, but right. It's just kind of funny that you think that way, because there is a huge push right now, especially in the science-based and natural communities, to like take away from the standard forms of cardio, like being on the stair stepper for 2 sessions, 45 minutes a day, which is what I did, which was super unnecessary in my opinion. But what's the biggest mistake you see that most people do during their contest preps?
I mean, honestly, I think this gets said a lot, but just not giving yourself enough time. And you see that all the time with, especially people that coach themselves, or they're competing naturally and the people they look up to are not competing naturally, right? And they're like, and there's always been that kind of standard 12-week prep that everyone like dreams of, and so then you get naturals who are 40 pounds above stage weight or something like that, and they're like, 12 weeks, let's go. And it's just like an absolute crash diet, like sprint to the finish line. They lose like 10 pounds of muscle in the process. So I think whatever, if you figure out how long you need, add 5 weeks to it, and that's probably what you actually need, at least. Yeah,
I know. I think Cliff Wilson he's like, all right, so have you prepped before? Cool. Did you get to the conditioning you want? Cool. Okay. Subtract like 10 to 20 pounds, and that's really where you're going to end up if you want to be like shredded, And I think that actually kind of leads into the big differences between enhanced and natural contest preps. And actually, I remember Dr. Mike talked a little bit about this, where some of the reason, and not all the reason, but some of the reason why enhanced athletes will do a much shorter prep is just for the duration of the products they're using, right? Like, you can't run some of these compounds for 16, 20 weeks without really bad adverse effects, right? And especially like towards the tail end of prep, I I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on steroids by any means, but a lot of the oral compounds have much more like negative effects than some of the injectable compounds. And so, and you tend to take more oral compounds at the end of prep. So the longer you're staying in that prep window when you're enhanced could potentially be a poor health outcome, more so than with natural athletes. There's got to be a sweet spot, right? Because if you diet for 87 weeks, that's probably not good. But if you diet for 6 weeks, also probably not ideal. There's got to be kind of a middle range, and that's one of the big things I see as a difference between natural and enhanced prep times. Is for natural athletes, you can get away, or no, sorry, with enhanced athletes, you can get away with doing things quicker because you have those anabolic compounds that are keeping all the muscle around, right? Mm-hmm. So, you can have days where you literally go, oh, I'm just going to protein sparing fast this bitch for the next like 3 weeks because, I'm big Rami in 2018 and realize I'm 40 pounds over stage weight. You know what I mean? And so there's just, there's this huge swing between natural and enhanced athletes. And I think that a lot of the times it's not the severity of prep, but just the duration that changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think you're right about the whole reason naturals need more time is to preserve as much muscle as possible, as painless as possible, right? And you're right. If you're running compounds, it's like there's really no reason to take your foot off the gas with a prep. It's like, let's just send it. And you're going to keep 99% of this muscle. And why not just get you there as fast as possible? So obviously naturals don't have that same benefit. If you try to do foot on the gas the whole time, you're going to end up just burning out, losing tons of muscle, lots of water retention, and probably never get, stage lean.
Yeah. I think so. What do you think is the ideal duration for a contest prep for a natural athlete?
Oh, wow. What a loaded question. I mean, obviously it depends on their starting point, right? I would say on average, what I've seen work the best is like 6 months. And like I said, it depends on how much you have to lose, if you've competed before, a lot of those factors. But yeah, I think 6 months is enough time for most people to get in shape with some diet breaks. We got refeeds, that sort of thing. Enough time to make adjustments and not have to make them prematurely, that sort of thing. But what about you? 6 months seem long enough?
I was gonna say I think that's kind of the side that like you said, it really depends on starting body composition, right? If someone, and it also depends what we define contest prep, right? Because if you say like, yeah, there's diet breaks involved. Well, if you're doing a diet and then you're taking a month off, then you're doing a diet, that's not the same diet anymore, right? So is that still prep? Because, you could argue that, anytime you've picked out a show and you're getting ready for it, that could be a prep, right? So I guess it really just depends how you would define it. I would say that going from, the lower range of healthy settling body fat, whether you call that 10 to 12, 10 to 15%, somewhere in there, down to super lean, I am on the side of not wanting to spend a super long time in that range because I just don't think obviously it's not healthy to be, below 10% body fat for a super long time as a male anyway. So I would, and for, if there's any female listening to this, first off, hey, secondly, just add 6 to 7% to any of the numbers that I'm referencing. And that would give you kind of an idea of the body fat where you would probably need to be referencing. But for me, I would say if you're a male, you're at 10% body fat and your goal is to be at 5, right? 5 or 4%, absolutely bonkers shredded. Then, I would say that, no more than 20 weeks for that, because and it's obviously it's like not a super hard line, but I just don't think spending an eternity in that small of a body fat is a good idea. I know, some people will say just get in and out. Dr. Mike's used the term like, oh, you're on fire, and it's like, taking a diet break or something when you're below 10% body fat is kind of like just like putting one of your limbs off fire. It's like the rest of you is still fucking on fire. So, I kind of agree. It's like getting in and out of the burning building as fast as possible. But taking your time to get to 10% and away from 10% is probably a little bit more of how I would do things, if that makes sense.
No, that does. I think you make a good point too, that I feel like, especially now, with more of the evidence-based community growing, a prep doesn't look like it used to. It's not really like, we're going to start on this day and here's the show, and it's just like one shot. A lot of people are doing kind of a pre-diet, or like where they get to, close to that 10% striking distance of stage weight, and then maintaining for a while, and then taking that shot at like really grinding it out. Like you said, an 87 week prep seems like kind of a long time. I think 3D MJ Godfather, I can't remember his name for whatever reason. Yeah, I only know people by their Instagram names. But, I mean, I think he was talking about like from when he decided like, okay, I'm going to start dieting for this to the actual show was something like 87 weeks, but it wasn't just like a full calorie deficit the entire time. Which I think people that maybe read the caption were like, this guy's insane. What was he losing, like 1 ounce a week?
Yeah. And I think people like Jeff Alberts are a really good case study, because, he's obviously been competing at a high level for a long time. And, for those of you who don't listen, Jeff Alberts is one of the founding members of 3DMJ, which is a pro natural bodybuilding contest prep organization, I guess is how I would describe them. They're kind of one of the premier natural bodybuilding organizations, and he has just I'm not going to say a different way of thinking, because I think people are shifting towards that way of thinking, but he has done basically every, he would call it like mistake. He's made all of them. So he's just a very interesting person to think about and follow when he's talking about his contest preps. Like you said, he took a super long time to get really lean, and he actually said that he doesn't think he's put on a crazy amount of muscle mass in the last 10 years. I mean, he's been training for something like 30 plus years at this point. So if he's making progress year to year, it's not measurable, right? It's so close to that zero mark that, who knows if he made progress. But one thing he does cite as being a change is the way he preps, and taking longer to get to that level of leanness, because he thinks that the big changes in his physique that he's seen over the last 10 years have just been him being able to actually maintain muscle mass. Another thing he talks about, and I want your opinion on, is what do you think the sweet spot is between contest preps? Do you think that, like the NPC guys do you think it's okay to prep every year or every other year? Or do you think it should be a little bit more than that? I mean, you shook your head, so I already know the answer, but.
Yeah, it blows me away when I see people prepping every single year. I think that's super, super unhealthy. And I know, at least after my show, I wasn't ready to go again 1 year later. You know what I mean? It would have been a disaster, I think. And so I think it really comes down to where you're at mentally, and some people take longer to kind of get past a lot of the mind fucks from prep, if you will. Sorry if we're not allowed to cuss.
No, you are totally okay.
Okay. And some people maybe get over it a little bit quicker. And I think with more experience, maybe you could prep, have them closer together. But at least for me, I was thinking like 3 years seems like a good off season. Then take another shot at it, especially for naturals. It's silly, I think, to step on stage so frequently that you look the same every time you do it. It's like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah, I totally I agree and I disagree. And here I think that it depends on how lean you're getting. If you're competing in NPC men's physique or bikini and you're, not, like I don't think I've seen even on like the Olympia stage an NPC guy below 7%. I don't think like even you look at the most like I would be hard pressed to think that some of those guys have like dry striated glutes. You know what I mean? Like, because I just don't think it's necessary for them. I think if you're a men's physique guy pushing that level of leanness, I mean, at least for me, everyone I've worked with and everyone I've ever seen in person, no one's losing their glutes first. No one loses their hamstrings and glutes first. So why are you going to push that 2% extra body fat off yourself to not get any upper body changes? So my only thing would be is if you're only getting down to like 8%, 7-8%, where you're competitive in the NPC as in men's physique, then why then you probably don't need 3 years in between, because it's not going to take you so long to recover from that, right? If you're doing a quick diet to get to 10%, then you're doing another quick diet to get to 8%, because it gets, for those of you who don't know, who haven't been there, it gets exponentially harder the leaner you try to get. Like I've never gotten to that superior level of leanness. I've never gotten to it. Eventually I'll be there someday, maybe, who knows. But where I got to, I felt like it took heaven and earth to get me there. And like, if I stepped on a natural stage, I would be out of shape. I wouldn't even be considered for the top 10, and there's only 11 people there, aka I'm last. So it's one of those things, like, I think people don't really give credit to how hard it actually is to get that lean. And I think depending on what division you're in, you can kind of get away with a different look,
Totally. I will say, I should have prefaced my answer with, I always assume it's natural bodybuilding level leanness whenever we're talking about it.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. But if we're talking to a broader audience, I think that's a really good point, that, 8%, 7%, that's not easy to get to. But the recovery from that is significantly easier than, trying to get like natty lean, if you will.
Yeah. Brett Freeman, I think, is, do you know Brett Freeman?
I believe so.
Bathtub.
Yeah.
Because you only know handles. He was just on the Revive Stronger podcast with Cliff Wilson, his coach. And they were talking about getting superior levels of lean. And something I took away from that conversation was, because he's arguably him. So for those of you who don't know, he won bantamweight natural world. So he was on stage at like 144 pounds, but looked insane. He looked incredible. Check him out, Brett Freeman. Highly recommend looking into him. But he was talking about, his prep, and so was Cliff Wilson. And one of the things they just talked about was like, if you want to get to that level of leanness, a lot of the times it just comes down to mental fortitude, because you're not, like, once you get to that level, you're not even seeing changes on the scale week to week. They might be month to month, at that point, because, to bring that superior level of conditioning, I don't know. As kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I really want your take on it. Something that I've seen as being a pretty common conversation right now around natural bodybuilding is, do you think it's too easy for naturals to get their pro card? And then the follow-up question I'm going to ask afterwards is, do you think that we're pushing naturals to get to enhanced levels of leanness that they don't need to?
This is a great question. I'm actually very glad you asked. And I actually do think it's a little too easy for natural bodybuilders to get their pro card. And you know, it's all, you got to put it in perspective. I am kind of comparing it to like the NPC, you know what I mean, and the IFBB. And it seems like so much of a bigger deal to get your pro card there. And I know there's more athletes. I know that like the level of muscle mass that people have is greater. But there's like, you have to go to multiple shows, right? You have to win like a national qualifier, and then is it top 2 at nationals that take pro card for the NPC?
I think it depends on the division. I know like for men's open, I think it like, once again, it depends on the division, it depends on the show. Like I think it's the same as like Olympia qualifications, depends on the, like I know at whatever one they had in Europe this year, they gave away like the top 3 all got to go to the Olympia, you know, versus like normally it's if you win a pro show you get to go to the Olympia. So like I think it's you know, kind of viewer discretion, you know.
Right. Well, to compare that to a natural bodybuilding show, right? If it's a pro qualifier, then all you have to do is win the overall. I mean, and when I say all you have to do, the reason I'm saying that is because, no, in fact, you just have to win your class to get a pro card in natural bodybuilding. Sorry. And what I find funny about that is that natural bodybuilding shows are way smaller too, right? So there's less competitors, and just winning your weight class or your division is enough to take home a pro card. It's like, and I think the one caveat to that is there has to be 5 people in your division. If there's any less than that, they don't get a pro card, right?
But that's kind of the silly point, right? Is that they have to say there has to be at least 5 people you're competing against to get a pro card. Like you're telling me I'm a professional and I came 5th from last. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of funny, right? I agree, and you know, it's funny because I eventually would love to have a pro card, you know, in a natural organization. But when I see people who like post like I just turned pro, like, and like, oh my god, it's this amazing thing, and then you see there's like 2 or 3 people in their division, because it depends on the federation too, you know. Like I don't know what I'm not even gonna take a shot at other divisions of besides the INBF and WNBF. I only know the NGA, but it like I don't know what their rules are around it, right? But you know, you'll go into someone's like Instagram profile and you can see like NGA pro or whatever, and then you look at their like contest pictures and you're like, huh. Like not to be rude, but huh. you know?
And so well, I was just gonna say, when I was comparing it to the NPC, I have had the thought that it would be really great to have like national qualifiers, same way NPC does. And so winning your class, you are then qualified to go compete against other people that have won their class, you know? And I think having kind of you got to win 2 shows in a way to get a pro card, to me, makes a little more sense. And I have also wondered, like, what's the motivation for them to kind of just give everybody a pro card that wins their class? And I think it's because they're trying to grow natural bodybuilding and get more people to do pro shows and things like that. And I wonder how many people would go to the national show even if they qualified, or, you know, I wonder if that's a concern.
Yeah, I think you make a really valid point. If they're only giving, if like you said, they would only give the overall at every natural show, right? How many INBF natural shows are there a year? 20? 25? How many NPC shows are on any given Saturday of any weekend all year? 600. I don't know. It seems like you can't go on the NPC News Online website without seeing like, oh, the results of the Indiana Southwest Region Classic. You know what I mean? It's like, what? And it's funny. I mean, like the fact that we even have a local show here in Montana every year. There's actually two. There's the one in Great Falls too, which I'm not sure if it's technically NBA sanctioned or whatever, but I'm just saying the fact that there's multiple shows here in Montana a year for bodybuilding is pretty wild in itself. And, so like it makes sense for the NPC to have to, you have to win a local show to qualify for nationals. And then if you win at nationals, then you can win a pro card, right? But if we had the same expectations for natural bodybuilding, when there's maybe a tenth the interest, if that's actually probably way too high. But you like the amount of people who compete at Worlds, for example, right? Like how many people compete at Worlds? I have no idea. Probably not a crazy amount. Not like the Olympia where they had, 50 something bikini girls just in that one category,
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the question is, how do they keep having like this pro card? How do they keep this thing you want to aspire to? In my mind, it shouldn't be something you can get doing your first or second prep. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that if you're doing your first natural bodybuilding show, just because you happen to show up when there was no like genetic freaks and like you just happen to like be slightly bigger than the next guy, I don't think that's kind of a fair way to get a pro card. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, I saw that exact thing happen actually. It was at the Washington Pro-Am in, I guess it was in Seattle or Tacoma. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, guys, first prep, there's only 5 other guys in his weight class, and he takes home a pro card. And I thought he looked really good. Like, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't really any competition as far as like pro level physiques right there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing is like bodybuilding, especially natural bodybuilding, is all about who shows up. Didn't our mute I can't really say he's my friend. I've never met him in person, but Paulie, didn't he go to a show and he was the only competitor in his division? Didn't that happen to him a few years ago?
I actually don't know. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all because he's like 7 feet tall.
Yeah, he's tall. He's like, what is he, 6'4", something like that? He's taller than me. He's a long boy, super long femurs. Yeah, I think I remember Hunter selling that, but I thought anyway. I won't use that example because I can't confirm or deny it. But I was just thinking like, that is something that does happen. It's kind of a unique problem to natural bodybuilding, I think, is the fact that people can go to a show that, maybe it's not the promoter's fault, but, it just doesn't have a lot of interest, and it's you and like 2 people in your class, and you like spent, 6 months, like we just talked about, getting absolutely peeled. You feel like you're going to die. And now you don't even get to qualify because the division isn't big enough for you to earn your pro card. That's kind of where I'm like, well, maybe you should kind of earn your pro card because you did everything right. And now it was just like, because there wasn't enough interest, you don't get it. I could see the argument going either way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's like, where's the cutoff? It's like, what are we gonna? If you have striated glutes, but there's less than 5 people in your class, we'll give you a pro card. It's like, how do you decide that?
Glutes is the answer.
It's always the answer.
I have a question for you. Do you think that it's harder or easier? Do you think there's any difference at all between getting like contest level leanness at a different like size? Do you think that people who are super muscular have a harder time getting lean than people who aren't, or what do you think?
That's actually something I haven't thought about too much, but in theory, I would almost say that people with more muscle mass should have an easier time getting lean. Um, and for multiple reasons. First off, more muscle mass is just going to look leaner,
Mm,
with a little bit more body fat because you're going to have like muscle bellies popping through that someone with less muscle mass wouldn't have. Um, Additionally, with more muscle mass comes just a higher basal metabolic rate. You're going to be dieting on more food theoretically. Even though there are some big guys that get down to like 50 grams of carbs, but I mean, I would say in theory, more muscle mass should help. In practice, I don't know that it pans out like that all the time, but
hmm. I would agree with you to an extent. I think I think I agree with what you said on the muscle mass, because like obviously when you have more muscle mass, it's pushing out against the skin. It's easier to see because there's just more of it. So you can give the illusion that you're leaner when you're not. Like, so there's that. And then on the other hand, like you said, having, just more body weight to carry around, you get to eat a little bit more, which theoretically would probably make some sort of a mental difference. But at the same time, you're still expending the same, right? Like you're not expending the same, but you're still in the same deficit that someone else is. So is it the level of deficit, the leanness, like what is it that makes you so tired during prep? It's got to be a combination of everything, right? So I would imagine that just because you're bigger, maybe it doesn't make it physiologically harder on you to get to that same level of leanness, but you might be able to get away with not getting quite as lean and getting the same look.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think people tend to see somebody's macros and they're like, what? You get to eat 200 grams of carbs on your diet? Like, I would never get to do that. And it's like, yeah, but for that person, that's terrible. They feel just as shitty as you do. You know what I mean? And that is not necessarily the point I'm making with the fact that they get to eat more food. I think that plays more into like the social acceptance of your diet. Like,
Mm,
I don't know if when you're dieting, you still have to spend time with other people. You're not in a vacuum. You know what I mean? And if you have more calories to diet on, you can probably get away with going to Chipotle occasionally, right, with your friends. But if you're a bikini competitor and you're on 50 grams of carbs or something like that, it's like those opportunities are few and far between where you get to like enjoy meals with a family or.
mhm.
So when I say more food, I think it makes like your social situation more bearable.
I think you touched on a perfect point. I think that was beautifully said. Like you said, bikini, like bikini girls, because they're generally speaking, they're the smallest, the least muscular development of all the categories in bodybuilding as a whole. They have to, and they're trying to get, pretty lean. Like they're not bodybuilding levels of lean, but they're lean, and it's not fun getting there regardless. But like you said, I knew a girl who was competing in the same show as I was, and we would send each other food challenge videos, part of our fun little food focused obsession that we had. I would be like watching like epic mealtime on the Stairmaster and stuff, because I was just so food focused. But the thing was, like, obviously I wasn't, like, when I did my prep, as you know, I wasn't allowing myself to do flexible dieting. I'll put it that way. And so even though I had, not a terribly small amount of calories, like not great, but not the worst either. Um, I was probably one of those people who could get away with, doing stuff like you said, like, occasionally if I woke up late or I accidentally miscalculated how much food I had, I still had to make something work. So I would go out to eat, and I would just get the quote unquote cleanest food I could find. right? Even though it was like at like Taco John's or something. You know? Yeah. Nothing's clean at Taco John's. And we you know, and it's one of those things like, you know, I know this girl in particular, she had to do, you know, 2 a day cardio, and, you know, she probably was sub 1200 calories, you know, like probably the last like 2 or 3 months of prep, you know, the whole time. And, you know, I also had to do 2 a day cardio, but had plenty more food than that. And like you said, I think the social aspect of it can be one of the hardest parts about bodybuilding as a whole, especially contest prep. Just trying to find a way to not make yourself reclusive, you know, because if you start, there's a lot of issues that you can have, especially when you start trying to like move your food around so that you can make sure that you can, like, oh, I really want to go have this meal with my friends, so I'm going to, you know, put all my carbs in that last meal of the day, all my fats in that last meal of the day. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to have egg whites, then for lunch I'm going to have tilapia, and then for dinner I'm going to have chicken, and then we're going to go to the bars and I'm going to have, you know, a rum and coke, and that's all I can fit. You know, it's like, it's one of those things, like, you, like, all of a sudden this social aspect of your life has to take a little bit of a backseat. And I think, especially because we're such a food focused culture, it makes it really difficult when you're prepping to be able to have these fun experiences with significant others, with friends, family. I remember having it was a family dinner, but it was just me. It was all my friends. And I went to their house and I brought my tilapia and asparagus and shit. I just brought it because at least there they made fun of me, but I didn't care because it was my friends. You know, they're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, just take off your shirt, dude. Ha ha ha. You know, that sort of thing. And which of course I did. But yeah, I mean, you
obviously.
But yeah, it was just, I think, kind of to round all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, I think it, just because of that aspect, I think being a smaller person could actually make it much harder to prep, just because of that social aspect. Because if you're like, you know, like I would guess my, you know, stage weight is between, you know, 185 and 190 would be like my ballpark guess, because Alberto Nunez told me so. Flex. But that would be like my ballpark where I would be, you know. That's just a considerably larger amount of food than someone who is, you know, gonna be on stage at 140 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, no matter which way you slice it, I'm gonna be able to eventually, you know, have one night out where I go out per week where I can go have food with my family or whatever. Just because, you know, maybe on my low days I'll have 200 grams of carbs, but on this person's low days they'll have, you know, 100 or 80. You know, it's an interesting thing to think about, though.
Yeah, well, I think, and like I said, kind of people picture it in a vacuum, you know, where it's like everything you think about your bodybuilding prep is the actual prep, you know, what you're eating, how you're training, but they don't really factor in to account that you can't quit your job or quit going to school while you're prepping. You have to do everything else too. And like, you can completely cut your friends off, but I wouldn't recommend it, you know, and it's a good idea to try to keep them in your life, you know. You might need some after the show, you know. So
otherwise dinner's going to be pretty lonely that night.
Right. So yeah, I think it is important to consider a lot of those other, like, dare I call them soft factors when it comes to like a prep, you know.
Yeah, what do you think before someone decides to compete, or, you know, maybe before they even decide to compete again, what would you say are the things they should probably consider before hopping back into a contest prep?
At least for me, and I think my opinion's kind of changed on this. But I would say most of it is mentality. Like, why do you want to compete? And you have to be brutally honest with yourself. You know, if you want to compete to show everybody how good you are at bodybuilding, or, you know, if it's like very externally motivated, I think it tends to be a little unhealthy. I also think if your reason for competing is that, and this is, I would say, mostly first-time competitors fall victim to this, but you see a bodybuilding show and you think, God, that's what I want to look like. But you're picturing all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I think this happens with bikini. They're like, oh, she looks great. Like, that's exactly what I want to look like. What better motivator to get there than to just sign up for this bodybuilding show? And then I'll just maintain it forever afterwards. Which of course we know never ends well. So I think being brutally honest with yourself that it's a temporary situation, you know, and you're not going to look like that forever. And knowing that going into it, I think is a big factor. But some of the other things that I think you should consider is how food focused you are before you even start. Because some people, and maybe you can attest to this, but some people have already been yo-yo dieting, or, you know, they're really not in a good place mentally with food to restrict it even further, you know? So that's another one that never ends well. And then I think you need to be honest with your family and your support network and ask them if they're okay with you doing it, because it's going to take a toll on every aspect of your life, you know? So if you have a significant other, I think it's a good idea to have that conversation and be like, there's a good chance I'm going to be an asshole for the next like 6 months, you know? And bodybuilding's kind of a selfish thing. You really do have to put yourself first in a lot of ways if you want to be competitive. And I think having a support network that's on board with that is only going to benefit you, you know?
Yeah, I think I like what you said about almost asking permission to prep, because I know that, you know, I think a lot of people who have a significant other when they first prep, either the relationship does not make it. Cause I know people who I've warned have been like, hey, you probably should talk to this person before you decide to make this change. And they've just broken up with them because they're like, yeah, I just don't think we'll be able to do it. And I'm like, first off, like I personally wouldn't put bodybuilding on the hierarchy of things I consider important in my life. Bodybuilding is, you know, I love it. It's this amazing thing that fills me with happiness and satisfaction. It is nowhere near my friends and family on that list. You know, it is not the highest thing of my self-identity. You know what I mean? And I think that has to be a realization for a lot of people, that like, if you're going to be sacrificing your relationships, your friends and family, your relationship with food, your relationship with your body, like these are all things you have to consider before starting a contest prep. I think if you can't see yourself going through a contest prep and keep maintaining a fairly normal existence, the only thing that should change is that you should be suffering a little bit, but I personally don't think you should be pushing that out on everyone that's around you, right? If what I've kind of told my girlfriend Cam is that the next time I prep, I'm just not going to tell her I'm doing it. I'm just going to start and hope she never notices until all of a sudden I step out of the shower and she goes, why are your glutes shredded? You know, that's the hope anyway. So, you know, I think you touched on a super great point. If you have someone in your life, a significant other or even roommates, you know, you need to have people who are in your corner, who support you and who understand how much stress this is going to put on you, and can appreciate when you're not trying to put that stress on them as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And I think taking a big picture look at what bodybuilding really is, and this is something that and when we're talking about mistakes I made in my prep, this was like the biggest one probably. Thinking that I was somehow going to turn pro, like be an IFBB pro or something, you know. For everyone listening to this podcast, bodybuilding is nothing more than a hobby. You know, like I don't want to insult anybody, but chances are you're never going to win any money. You know, like it's probably not going to become a job for you. it's literally a hobby that just happens to be very, very involved. But I think having that mindset, and like you said, your friends and family rank way higher than bodybuilding in the grand scheme of your life. Just keeping that in mind at all times, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like what you said. I actually, one thing I wanted to ask, one thing I asked my last guest, and I would like to put the question to you as well. Do you think bodybuilding is a sport?
Absolutely, like without a question, yes.
You think so? Because I'm kind of more on the cynical side that it's more like a pageant, if anything.
Okay,
Because
I get it, but if you think there is no other sport, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot think of another sport with where nutrition is dialed in with such precision. You know what I mean? It even Olympic athletes, like, yes, they have very tightly controlled nutrition, but think about like a peak week for a natural bodybuilder and how 50 grams of carbs can make the difference between like being full, being flat, being spilled over. Like you have to run like a test peak week, all of these things. And what really defines a sport is, to me, like, there's a competition, right? And there's this like mental aspect to it where there's something you have to push through. There's some sort of training preparation involved for the actual competition. And whoever prepares, trains, and is just naturally gifted the most tends to be the winner, right? And that's the case in all sports. But for me, it does come down to nutrition. That's the reason I love it anyway, is that I cannot think of another sport on this earth where nutrition matters like to the degree that it matters for bodybuilding.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, you see, like, you know, just like you said, the actual like things that you have to do in order to excel in bodybuilding. You have to, like, things have to be so close to 100% perfect, and not just for a small amount of time. Like, they have to be perfect for a long period of time for you to get what you need. Especially like you look at, you look at natural bodybuilding. You start, like we talked about earlier, you start a contest prep maybe 6 months out, right? And for those first 2 or 3 months, maybe you can, get away with, going having like drinks with the boys, like once every couple of weeks, or, you can go drop by your mom's house and go have some mashed potatoes. Like, you can get away with doing all these things. And obviously you can get shredded doing an if it fits your macros approach, but you still have to have that underlying concept all the time that what you're eating is directly going to impact your performance. There's those stories of like Michael Phelps when he was getting ready for the whatever Olympics, and like all the people on YouTube do his eating challenges and stuff. But like, you look at what he was eating and it's like, yeah, he had to eat all these things. In bodybuilding, you get to eat all these things. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a level of suffering that I think you don't get in a lot of sports, because it's never ending. It's like it's never that bad. It's not the pain that you get, like, as someone who used to cycle, as the pain you get like trudging up a 4-mile hill and it takes you an hour because it's like, an 18% grade and you're just like huffing and puffing and your legs are about to give out and you feel like you're going to pass out. It's not that level of pain, but it's this underlying sense that I'm going to die all the time. Like,
for months.
For months. Yeah. It's not like when someone's peaking for a strongman or a powerlifting meet, or they're, in their last phase of training for the Olympics. It's like that only lasts X amount of time, because it only can, because you can only recover from it from that amount of time, right? But like, you don't have this underlying sense of I'm going to perish. you know.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that really does make bodybuilding stand out against all these other things. But I mean, it's funny because it's a sport I love so much. And I say sport, but now that it's a pageant I love so much. Just sounds kind of funny. And I'm not against it being considered a sport by any means. It's just kind of an interesting topic that I've seen people bring up because, I mean, people are trying to get video games in the Olympics, right? So it's like, are video games a sport? If they have a place where you can compete and it takes practice and stuff, it's like, could you argue that it's a sport? Probably. People consider chess a sport. Maybe.
Yeah.
It's very open-ended, but it's very rare that you see something that requires so much time and dedication and constant tracking of what you're doing that doesn't get considered a sport. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, and I think, sorry, just before we move on, I want to make this point. I know I mostly touched on nutrition when I was making the case that it's a sport, but as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about the physical demands are insane. And this at the end of a prep, it's like, you've been there. Getting under a barbell when you're on like 100 grams of carbs or, nothing feels as hard as that. And that's just going to the gym. Like, your whole day feels like that. Getting out of bed in the morning is like, oh my God, I have to do this again, And yeah, every time you step into the gym, you got to be on like 500 milligrams of caffeine just to get through a 1 hour workout. Like, it's something you can't understand unless you do it, in my opinion. And it's easy to look at from the outside and be like, it's just like all glory. Like, you get to just look shredded and go to the gym and, you get to eat all these elitist foods and like, it seems very like selfish and I don't want to say easy, but I don't think people know the true like pain.
I don't disagree. Like I personally, physically, other than like the lack of libido, that was the thing that for me was the hardest thing to, I guess, the softest problem I had. And I just I think that for me it was the mental aspects. It was the knowing that when I woke up, it was just knowing that I had to do, like, I had like a day today and I was like, oh, I was hungry today. I was like, I'm going to be hungry every single day until the day after in fact, the 3 months after I step on stage, because that just doesn't go away for a super long time. And it's just like one of those things, like I wish I had, I think one of the best things I got out of contest prep was the mental fortitude. I think it really did teach me a lot about making a decision, realizing that I was the only one putting myself through this. You know what I mean? Like internalizing the fact that no one else is making me do this. And therefore I can't put any of the kind of little grievances that I'm having on anybody else, because I'm the only one who decided to make this happen, right? And I think it's just a very interesting concept, because so many people like talk about, like their relationships like struggling and like, they're not doing well at work and all this, and I'm super guilty of this when it first happened to me. Like, I remember my boss telling me, like, I was probably still doing better than like the other two people I was working with at the time because they were that bad. But like, compared to how proficient I was at my job when I started, she was like, I'm very excited for this to be over for you. Like her hinting at like you're not doing a good job anymore, that sort of thing. And it's one of those things, like, you don't realize, I'm not saying it has to affect all those aspects. It doesn't. You can, I think if you do have the mental fortitude and, you pull all this effort, and you internalize that you're the only one making this decision, and therefore it shouldn't really affect anyone who didn't agree to do this, then you can kind of work around it. But until you accept that, you take that responsibility for your decision, it's really hard to, go through a prep and put all these problems on all the people who are surrounding you. Like I made Cam not have a good few months for sure. Because I just like wasn't, one of the things for me, like I wasn't emotionally like as available because I was just tired like all the time.
Yeah.
And so like I felt like I couldn't mentally handle like any time she needed to talk about something or whatever, right? And that's no fault of hers. That's all on me, And so one of the things that before I do another prep is I need to make sure that and that's why I talked about like I don't want Cam to know I'm prepping. I want to be able to get through that whole situation without her even realizing that it happened, or at least not for the last, like there's no way around to get the last few months. Like the last 2 months, you're going to suck regardless. It doesn't matter who you are.
And you're going to look like a skeleton. Like,
yeah. You're going to look sickly. That's
you really
like,
are. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, did people come up to you and be like, are you okay when you were prepping?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And you've probably heard Cliff Wilson say that, like, that's how you know you're getting close, like when people are worried about your life. But definitely. And it was funny because I was like still probably 2 months out, people are like, are you done? You couldn't get any leaner, and I still had a lot to lose, but it's just people that aren't around bodybuilding a lot. But yeah, they'd see me in there doing cardio and they're like, dude,
you're done. Why are you up here?
Yeah. They're like, will you just stop? Like they were literally legitimately worried about me. And they should be, because I was pretty close to death, it felt like.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other thing that like, it's also the other thing. So obviously there are the physical changes, the things you can see, but like looking to see, like you can tell when someone's on prep, just the way they carry themselves. They talk slower because they can't like form words at a coherent pace. They're, their significant other hates them, like all these little telltale signs, that
like a zombie. Like, when you're talking to somebody that's on prep, you can tell they're not listening to you at all. Like all they're thinking about is their next meal.
Yeah, they're like, I get 20 grams of oats in this next meal, and I'm gonna savor all 3 bites. Like, yeah, dude.
If I know someone's on prep, I'm not trying to hold a long conversation with them. I'm just trying to like pep them up a little bit. I'm like, dude, looking sick. Like, keep up the great work, and that's about all they can handle.
Yeah. I remember. I was actually told that I was handling prep very well because I was always really cheerful and happy, and people would always come up to me and they're like, how are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm great. I'm like having a great time. I'm a pretty uppity person in general. But I remember around about 2 weeks out, I had the resting bitch face pretty bad and was not as excited. But I was also, to be fair, eating, 1.5 pounds of tilapia every day, which is not recommended. And, I was literally eating that, egg whites, 1 whole egg, and asparagus. And that was it.
And trying to survive.
Yeah.
Trying to lift weights, actually.
Yeah, trying to lift weights without having a trace of glycogen in my system.
And doing an hour and a half of cardio a day.
An hour and a half of cardio every day. Yeah. Yeah. So to anyone curious enough, a little bit about my first contest prep was not my greatest experience, for sure. I think there was a lot of things that could have been done a little bit better, but it's also a huge learning experience. And to be honest, I'm really grateful that I had, the experience that I had, because it made me want to look for different ways to do it. To be a little bit more candid, like I remember having, like what I was saying, like for anyone listening, I was not kidding about the tilapia. That was not a joke. I had starting at, I want to say like 16 to 20 weeks out, I had 4 tilapia meals that were each 6 ounces of tilapia each for 16 to 20 weeks straight, no bar. Like it was consistent. And so I did the math one time, and I had eaten like, I don't remember, but it was like something like 80 pounds of tilapia. It was just an obscene amount of fish. And the reason is because I had kind of decided around this time that I was going to be pescatarian, which was a weird decision to make right before you do a contest prep. Probably not the time to make a food-based decision. But yeah, so there was that. At the time, I had learned about If It Fits Your Macros about halfway through. And I realized that there was this other way I could be doing things. My coach at the time didn't really believe in that sort of thing. No, not saying he didn't think it was real, but he didn't think like that was the way professionals did it. So, you can't do that if you want to be a professional, that sort of deal. And then, yeah, there was just a lot of little things that I think were not necessary, like the 2-a-day cardio sessions that were each, 45 minutes to an hour. The 2.5-hour gym sessions, and then, posing.
Training to failure on everything.
And training like beyond failure, forced reps, like eccentric only movements when you concentrically failed, like anything you can think of to make me as sore as humanly possible. Which, was a lot of, there was plenty of things that I think it was definitely a wake up call for me, because I was like, everyone's doing this. This seems like it doesn't need to be like this. And that's when I discovered kind of the science-based community and realized, oh shit, people are getting way better results and not doing 2-a-day cardio and eating 1.5 pounds of tilapia every day, and I remember, I think the first person I found was Eric Helms, and Dr. Eric Helms from 3DMJ, and following him a little bit and listening to their podcast and being like, oh, I did all of this, like I'm glad, like in hindsight 2020, I'm glad I had the experience, because sometimes you have to do something wrong to learn how to do it right. And I'm not saying that I got from A to B. Well, I got from A to Z, but I just had to make the C to Y, X, Y, Z. Yeah, okay, right. The B to Y mistakes to get there, And so it one thing the scientific community just as a whole taught me was just there's so many things that the bro bodybuilding culture does that you just don't have to do, or you don't have to take to the extreme that they take. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, and another thing I was going to say is I feel like that sort of approach gives you more of an appreciation for like the approach you use now, right? Like Nothing seems as bad now as it was back then, So even I feel like cutting becomes easier, or dieting for a show. It's like, yeah, this sucks, but remember how I did it last time? Like it was
this is nothing.
Yeah, I don't mind this at all.
Yeah, I did a quick diet, like I think I spent like a full year in a surplus without a change, and then I did a 6 or 8 week diet for a photo shoot. I didn't track a thing. Like I just didn't have to track, because at that point I had done my contest prep, so I was at least I understood what like whole foods were, because that's all I ate. And then I did a year and some change of tracking, and I was, so I got really good at tracking and understanding macros and stuff like that. And then I did, 6 or 8 week cut where I went from, 224 down to like 205 or something like that without tracking anything. I lost like 20 pounds, 6 or 8 weeks, and it was so easy. It was just like, I just like, for the first time, I just didn't stuff myself. Have you ever been that far into a massing phase where you just stop stuffing yourself and all of a sudden you're fine?
Oh yeah, that's essentially how I transition into a cut. It's like I don't take it serious until I have to. It's like if I'm bulking really hard, I'll just start eating like a normal person, and the weight falls off. I don't have to track anything, you know. And then when I plateau from there, like maybe that's when I'll start thinking about it a little bit. But
Mm.
yeah, that's pretty much the transition period. Is just to like stop stuffing myself a little bit.
I'm the same way. When I finish a diet, I eat 4 to 5 large servings of protein a day, and then whatever else just happens. And I keep in mind more so like the window around training with like what kind of foods I'm eating. But for the most part, I just kind of let my body weight do its thing to a point, because then I'll hit a point, generally I lose about 10 to 12 pounds. I'll gain about 10 to 12 pounds, and that's when I'll start to taper. And that's when I'm like, okay, now all I need to do is be pseudo cognizant of the fact that, like, oh yeah, I just like don't need to get like 6 donuts this one day, and then it's fine again.
Right.
Yeah. But
No, totally.
yeah.
So I don't want to hijack this podcast, but we were kind of talking about like the mentality behind bodybuilding, or, you know, and I say this a lot, that bodybuilding is like a mind fuck. But I wanted to know, with your contest preps, like, and I know you had that Wendy's experience, and I always love this story, but I love hearing like people's mind fucks on their contest preps, and then I have one to tell myself.
Yeah. Okay. I think this will be a cool way to round out the episode, is these dumb stories. So, I can't remember when this happened. It was either like during peak week, which is not a good time for this to happen, or it was the week after. It might have been the week after. But I remember I was laying in bed and I had just fallen asleep, and I woke up and I like stared at the ceiling and I was like, what time is it? And I like checked my phone and it was like 150 or like 145, and I was like, in the morning, and I was like, the Wendy's drive-through is open for 15 more minutes. And so I like didn't wake up Cam, and I like snuck out of the house and went to Wendy's like 5 or 10 minutes before they closed for the night. Yeah, and it's something like 2 in the morning, and I'm the only person in line, and I ordered like, $20 worth of value menu items, and I sat in the Wendy's parking lot in the dark, in the quiet, in the cold, because this was still like pseudo winter. And I just plowed through probably like 6 burgers, a couple of Frosties, at least a few fries, and yeah, I was just sitting in my car alone in the dark at 2 a.m. eating Wendy's. And I had like woken myself up at like 1 in the morning because I knew Wendy's was open. And oh my God, there was another.
During peak week. I think that's the best part.
I think it was during peak week is the worst part. And I just, it was like I cracked. It was like, I think one of the marks of a good coach is knowing how much your client can take. And I think having that relationship with your client and realizing like what they can take is so, so important, because I think if I had a bit more of an open relationship with my coach, which sounds as a weird way to say it, but a little bit more communication with my coach, in the sense that he was, more cognizant of how I was feeling mentally and all these things, he probably wouldn't have pushed as hard as he did. And therefore I probably wouldn't have cracked, and I probably would have brought a better package to stage, as limp and soft as it might have been at the time. Anyway, what's your story?
Yeah, so I have a couple, but I think the one I'll tell, just to one up yours, because it wasn't peak week, it was show day, is so like I had gotten my whole peak week strategy from Lane Norton. Like back in the day, this is what everyone used. It was on bodybuilding.com, and it was like the one science-based peak week approach that was out there, like, and available to the public. So I had calculated all my peak week stuff like to the gram of carbohydrate that I was planning on eating. And the problem is, I was at a hotel in a different state, so like getting foods was kind of an issue. And so I was worried about what I was going to eat the day of the show, like morning of, try to carb up a little bit. And I knew there was like an Einstein Bagels right next to our hotel, you know, and I'm like, perfect. Like I can look at their menu. They have the nutrition facts online. I had put together this like perfect meal that was going to hit these arbitrary macros that I got offline. And I had it all planned out. Right. And so I wake up because the show starts at 8. So I wake up at like 5:30, trying to get over to Einstein Bagels by 6. And I show up and they're closed. And I was just like, oh my God, like my whole plan is out the window. And when you talk about a mind fuck, there was a grocery store across the street, but I was like, no, Denny's is open.
Denny's.
Denny's was across town. Like I had to go out of my way to go to Denny's, but I think honestly in the back of my mind, I just really wanted to eat some Denny's. Like at this point, I didn't even give a shit about the show. And so we roll into Denny's at like 6 in the morning, and the macros had gone out the window. I was just ordering whatever I thought sounded good. I had like this giant plate of tater tots, like covered in gravy and like cheese and eggs and shit. And this was literally like 3 hours before I was
oh my God.
it was just like it took the smallest issue with my plan for me to just be like, well, fuck it, you know, I'm just gonna like stuff my
it happens. It like I remember anytime I had a so I obviously struggled with some like binge eating problems, but during and after, and I think it was a little bit of a product of having an all-out cheat meal once a week where I could eat anything I wanted as long as it was in one sitting, and that carried through to like, you know, still does. And I remember like I would go to work and we would have to go do a delivery or something because I worked at Mattress King, so I was delivering mattresses, and we'd have to go do deliveries, and anytime we had to go put gas in the truck, I was in that gas station dropping like $30 on anything I could think of. You know, I'd be like, I'm gonna go get a coffee, and I'd come back with like gas station sandwiches, like those Reese's king size fast breaks, like, you know, Pop-Tarts, and literally anything that I thought remotely would, like, in my mind I was like, this will fuel my training, bro, you know. But you know,
yes, that's what I was gonna say. That's the part of the mind fuck though, is that, and I'm guessing this happened for you,
bargaining.
Somehow you rationalize that you're actually doing this for the benefit of your physique. You know what I mean? Like everything I binged on after the show, it was like, no, I'm not binging. I'm carbing up for tomorrow's session. You know, like
Yeah.
I had this like way that my mind was rationalizing like this pint of ice cream that I was plowing through. I was like, just think about the pump tomorrow, though. It's good.
The pump is going to be filthy, but you're not going to be able to see it under the nice veil of water and fat that you put on overnight. Yeah, that's like, I mean, I was lucky. I honestly was lucky. I looked as good as I did on stage, which I don't think I look great. Like, bar none, I do not think I look great. Because that entire peak week, I was just, I had cheated on my diet once, and I remember being like, that's it. I cheated. That's it. Game over. Now it's just whatever happens, happens. And so like I would literally be on my way to posing practice and stop at a gas station, get like, you know, like those Hostess thing, like the pre-made Hostess donuts that they have been there for like 3 months. And, you know, they're the blueberry donut holes that no one likes. And I just be on the way to the gym, be like, oh, posing's going to look sick today. Be like, Steven, you're not flat. And I'd be like, I don't know.
Weird.
Yeah, that's strange. I don't know. But yeah.
No, I would say the same for me though. Like my physique was better like 2 days out than on show day, and it was literally because of that like game time decision I made to go to Denny's and just like order the biggest fucking thing on the menu before I stepped off stage.
Yeah.
Like 8 pounds of food in my belly. Like I was like,
oh my God.
barely posed.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I was the same. I have a few pictures from the very start of peak week where like I think like if the show happened to be on like the Tuesday of peak week, I think, you know, I would have been in the running for like top 3 of my category pretty easily, because I looked really good. I have this one shot of my back where my shorts are low and you can see the glute striations, and you know, and I think I'm just like, wow, that's me. That was my back on this one day. And then I went to Wendy's. you know, it's funny how you can mess up so many months of progress just in that short window, and it's, you know, it is what it is, and that's the beauty of contest prep is. But and anyway, I think this is a great place to wrap up the podcast. Landon, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. You're really helping me out. I'm trying to get this podcast off the ground, and I appreciate you coming and sharing all your experiences. If people want to like follow you on Instagram, what's your handle?
Yeah, my handle is Landho, and that space is an underscore. So
Gotcha.
You can find me there with all my dope content.
There's sick content. Cool. I'll have it down in the show notes. And I just wanted to say thank you once again for coming. I really appreciate it. And thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you in the next one.